Greetings! Welcome to the 5th featurette for Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades 2. I'm Anton, Game Director, and today we're going to be talking all about Melee. We're doing things a bit differently for this one. For most of this featurette, I'm going to be passing you off to another member of our meaty team, Zach, creator of Vertigo Remastered and Vertigo 2. Take it away, Zach!
In H3VR2, melee weapons aren't the center of attention, but that doesn't mean they need to be neglected. I've spent the last month working on a brand new melee system that is a huge step up from H3VR. First, let's talk about the basics, handling melee weapons in H3VR2. Just like with firearms, there are multiple hand poses you can use to hold them. With many melee weapons, you can use the AX button to quickly swap between two poses, such as forehand to backhand, or front to back on an axe. Many melee weapons can also be held two-handed for extra power and follow-through. A select few weapons have special extra interactions. These spinning karambits are now physics-driven, so they can actually collide and bounce off of things while in this state. We've also brought this new physics to spinning revolvers, so you can now do silly stuff like this. So far, there are two types of melee damage, blunt and bladed. Bladed can also be divided into stabbing versus cutting, which have slightly different effects. Let's go over all these types of damage. In H3VR2, your fists are a blunt melee weapon. Like all blunt weapons, the main effect of punching a Sosig will be stunning, concussing, or knocking them down. Once they're incapacitated, you can take your time finishing them off. With our state-of-the-art Sosig rendering technology, Sosigs can be permanently dented by strong enough blunt damage. Ouch. Beating my meat, etc. Note that this is a purely visual effect, it does not actually change the shape of their physics collider. Now, this is a good time to highlight one of our power-ups, Muscle Meat. This power-up increases the effectiveness of all melee weapons, but has a particularly strong effect on punching and other blunt damage. Muscle Meat also gives you the ability to pick up and throw Sosigs, as well as straight up tear them in half. Let's take our first look at bladed weapons in H3VR2 with stabbing damage. Bladed weapons with a point can be stabbed into Sosigs. Once stabbed, a physics joint activates, simulating friction to keep them stuck in place. The Sosig takes damage depending on how deeply they are stabbed, and will also start bleeding when the blade is removed, causing more damage over time. As you can see, bladed damage creates permanent wounds on the Sosig, using the same technique as bullet holes. Blades can stab multiple Sosigs at once, and one melee weapon can also have multiple blades that stab independently, like this double-sided axe. Blade physics are not just restricted to Sosig's bodies. Clothing and accessories can provide protection from blades, but soft objects can also be stabbed, and stabbed all the way through to the Sosig's body. Cutting damage with edged weapons is where H3VR2's bladed combat really shines. The physics are similar to how we simulate stabbing, with a physics joint sticking the blade in the body and simulating internal friction, but with less constraints. Here, the realistic friction really comes into play. A blade can get stuck halfway through a Sosig, and a sawing motion helps overcome the static friction and cut the rest of the way through. If you cut all the way through, you might just slice the Sosig in half. This is not a truly dynamic slice, it can only happen at one of three joints. Another thing you can do is start with a stab and then pull the blade sideways to transition to a cut. Shorter blades with an edge can still do cutting damage and cause bleeding, but they cannot slice a Sosig in half completely. There's a wide variety of blades, all with different effects depending on their physical shape and size. In H3VR2, any weapon is a throwing weapon if you want it to be. But we've also got some that are specifically designed for throwing. Just like with cartridges, you can grab a whole handful of these shurikens and store the whole handful in your pocket as well. This makes them more viable without spawn locking for an infinite supply, and also just more fun to use. Same deal with throwing knives. Our goal is anything that you could realistically hold many of in real life, you should also be able to in H3VR2. If we succeed, it should remove some of the fiddliness of interacting with small objects in VR, and, like I mentioned, make these small throwing weapons more viable in combat. Now, like I said, any weapon can be a throwing weapon, and this is especially true when you add in the physics-based stabbing. It's pretty fun to whip out your sword and impale it through Sosig's head from across the room, as long as your aim is good enough. Now that is a pretty comprehensive look at the new melee weapons of H3VR2. We will see you in 2 weeks' time for the next featurette. Make sure to wishlist... Oh, wait, I'm getting word that there is one more thing that Anton wants to show. I wonder what that could be.
Wonderful job, Zach. You might have seen in one of our H3VR2 teases about jungle mags. Let's talk about that feature as a whole. Jungle mags, or coupled mags more correctly, are 2 or more magazines affixed together, and they let you reload faster. In real life, this can be something that, like, they come like this from the factory, or they've got some feature built into them, like the way that G36 mags have a little clip on the side that allows them to clip together, or, you know, just some duct tape. In H3VR2, we now support coupled magazines, but with a couple limitations. This coupled Sterling magazine is an example. At the moment, we only support pre-configured magazines set up this way, which is to say, you know, we spend the time authoring, connecting them together and such. We would like to eventually support user coupled mags where you can sort of set that up for yourself, but that's, you know, another permutation space explosion. No idea. It might not be something we get to at launch or even soon after. No promises on that feature. Another limit, just to get off the table, coupled mags can't be inserted into multiple guns. You can't, like, jam one into the well of one gun and then one of the other mags into the other. All the fancy stuff that we do with magazine animations where they smoothly come in and out of guns requires that a magazine is controlled by the magazine well of exactly one firearm at a time. It's just a hard limit. That doesn't mean we can't do some zany stuff, like this completely ordinary BB&B Pentamag, which almost doubles your capacity compared to its standard 30-round Stanag, while providing incredibly important tactical capabilities, such as loading a magazine while it is still inserted in the gun and you're firing from it. And at long last, let's talk about mag palming in H3VR2. This is sometimes also called tactical reloading or retention reloading, just so you know what we're talking about. Whatever you call it, it's a reloading technique where the reloading hand starts by grabbing the new magazine and then holds on to both during the reload and then retains the spent magazine afterwards. Initially, we had some huge concerns about implementing something like this, primarily with the amount of extra work that would be added per magazine to implement this. And as it turns out, those fears were completely justified. Mags now need like 3 times the number of manually authored poses. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ole. Yeah, so the way this works in H3VR2 is that each magazine has or can have a number of pre-configured magazine palming interactions. You bring the held magazine up to another magazine, hold both the trigger and the grip button at the same time on the controller, and it'll engage the closest compatible magazine palming interaction until you release either input. Magazine palming means you'll spend less time without a magazine in the gun while reloading, and you won't have to keep a spare slot in your belt for the spent magazine or have to throw it on the ground until you're done reloading. One limitation with this is that magazine palming, because we're manually authoring all of these poses, that we can have all these sick transitions, and so it always looks right, we have to explicitly configure this cross compatibility. And so that means that magazines that you hold pretty much identically, like say a 30-round PMag and a 20-round M16 magazine, can be palmed together, but like a 30-rounder and a 10-round AR magazine don't, because the way that you hold those and load them in and out of the well is different enough that we just can't resolve the conflict between them. And of course, you won't be able to palm like drum magazines together. Your hands aren't nearly big enough. A lot of time and love has gone into this feature. The fact that our hand poses are already this detailed and complex is what made this feature much harder for us to implement than it would be for most other VR games whose core hand pose systems are simpler and less production demanding. So yeah, this has definitely raised the production floor a little more for every single gun, but just like I said in an earlier featurette, it's just the trade-offs for unparalleled excellence. Anywho, that just about does it for Featurette 5. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're as crazy excited about the ridiculous, meaty melee physics coming in H3VR2 and all of the magazine hijinks. Make sure to follow us on our H3VR2 socials for the very latest news, meme videos. Make sure to like and subscribe and wishlist the game everywhere it is. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Peace.